September 7th, 2023 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Sebastian is hereby called to order. Got it fixed? Okay, I'll try again. We're calling to order the September 7th meeting of 2023 Sebastian City Planning and Zoning Commission. We will begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Cottenberg?
Here.
Mr. Carter?
Present.
Ms. LaRusso?
Here.
Mr. Haddix?
Here.
Ms. Battles?
Here.
Ms. Kinchin?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, the announcements for the evening are Commissioners Giese and Matthews are both excused from tonight's meeting. Our alternate member, Mr. Roberts, will be voting in the place of Ms. Matthews. First order of business for the members, you've all had the opportunity to review the minutes of our last meeting, August 17th meeting. The chair will entertain a motion. I move to approve.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of August 17th, 2023 as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Haddock. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. I am going to be opening our public hearing. Our city attorney will read the title.
Good evening. This is a public hearing for subdivision preliminary plat, Cross Creek Lake Estates Edition, 24.4 acres, 35 lots, 1.43 units per acre, Powerline Road, Yearling Trail, VLDR future land use, very low density residential, max 3 units per acre, RS 10 zoning district, residential single family. The requested action is approval of a preliminary plat for 35 lots on a 24.4 acre parcel to an addition into the existing Cross Creek Lake Estate subdivision. The project owner is Henry Fisher. The agent is the engineer Joseph Schulke, and I believe the representative's here to present on behalf of the owner.
Thank you. Okay.
And it is a public hearing.
Thank you. Because we have so many people attending this evening, and my assumption is that many of you wish to speak, and we do want to hear from the public, I'm going to ask for a show of hands how many of you expect to address us this evening. Looks like about 10 people, 12 people, okay. Please be aware that we have a 5-minute limit to the speech that you may give, and any of your comments are to be directed to the chair. No personal insults, no applause, no rowdiness. I see you being rowdy already. And again, let me assure you, we do want to hear from you. I'm going to ask the applicant to make his presentation at this time.
Good evening. Chairperson Cottenberg, Planning Commission members. My name is Warren Dill. I'm a local attorney in town, and I'm pleased to be here tonight to represent Dr. Fisher regarding the preliminary plat for Cross Creek addition. Along with me tonight, I do have Dr. Fisher here, and I have Jeff Barquette. Jeff is an engineer with Schulke, Vidal, and Stoddard. Joe Schulke is the project engineer. You probably saw that on the application, but he's had a medical emergency in the family and will not be able to attend tonight. So if you have any engineering type questions, Mr. Barquette will be able to answer those for you. Cross Creek addition is part of Cross Creek Lake Estates. Cross Creek addition is being proposed for 35 lots on 24.5 acres. 35 lots on 24.5 acres gives you a density of 1.43 units per acre. It's well below the permitted density in RS10, which I believe is 3 units per acre. So we're at half of what's allowed in the city of Sebastian under your regulations. The average lot size is about 30,500 square feet. That's the average size, which is about 7/10 of an acre. There are some lots smaller, but there's some lots larger. That's why I use the word average size in there. Staff has provided its usual thorough, detailed review of this project and has concluded, in their professional opinion, that it meets all subdivision requirements that the city of Sebastian has. And they've recommended approval of the preliminary plat. This is a really straightforward project. I know there's a lot of folks here that have some issues with a couple of the city requirements. And hopefully they will be satisfied when we're finished. But it is a textbook easy project in the city of Sebastian, given the number of units and the density of the project and what's allowed. I don't think you have anything else in the city that has density that low. I could be wrong, but I'm not familiar with anything. Cross Creek Lake Estates, the density in there is only 1.18 or something like that. Very low density project, very low impact on the city, very high tax base for the city, with very low impacts. Cross Creek Estates was annexed into the city in 2005. 2005, it came into the city. Dr. Fisher brought 160 acres in at that time. Back in 2005, the city had a very, very aggressive annexation benefit program. We had to stand up here and satisfy the Planning Commission, but primarily the City Council, and primarily only about 2 members on the council, that they were getting a significant benefit by bringing this property into the city. They didn't seem to be too concerned about the low density and the high taxes. They wanted something in addition to that. So as a result, Dr. Fisher was instrumental in constructing Power Line Road from Barber to 510. That cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. It's almost a mile run back a long time ago when you get a lot more bang for your buck than you do today. Without Cross Creek, you wouldn't have Powerline Road today. Many of the people in this room that use Powerline Road would not be going there. It was a dirt trail back then. And Dr. Fisher alone was responsible for getting that through and done. I'm proud of what he did, and I'm bragging about it too tonight, because nobody else in the city has ever done it. I don't think your new annexation has spent that much money on the city. You're talking of thousands of acres, over 1,000 acres, on your most recent annexation. So I think Dr. Fisher has paid his due to the city of Sebastian. It was a major, major undertaking. Well, getting back to present day, as I said, Cross Creek itself is 160 acres with 134 lots. Very low dense project. Cross Creek addition was always intended to be a phase within Cross Creek. It's right across this. It's inside Cross Creek. Unfortunately for us, the city is taking the position that it's a new subdivision. A new subdivision, which means we're looking at a bunch of new requirements that weren't around when Cross Creek came in. As I said, Cross Creek was always intended to be part. Cross Creek addition was always intended to be part of Cross Creek. The declaration of deed restrictions, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which everybody that lives in there is subject to, speaks about this property coming into the city. Talks about this being a phase of the development. It's nothing new. It shouldn't be anything new to the residents if they've read their restrictions. Full disclosure was made back in 2010 or whenever we recorded those documents. It's been there for a long time. And the third amendment to the declaration, which was in 2018, was specifically addressing this property. And it made it clear, very clear, that this property is part of Cross Creek, and the new residents have to comply with the same requirements, as the existing residents of Cross Creek. Same assessments, same restrictions, same everything. So, as I said, in essence, this was always intended to be one development. But we're looking at new conditions now, which I'm going to talk about some of them, because the staff feels it was new because the word phase wasn't put on the preliminary plat. It was there, but it wasn't called phase. That's why. So, because we're a new subdivision, we have to address the following items. One of which is access, which is going to strike the heart in these people behind me. Staff has required, this is a city requirement, this is not Dr. Fisher's desire to do that. City requirement is that we have another access on Shakespeare. Not Dr. Fisher's desire. Dr. Fisher feels that we have two access points now. We have the main entrance on Powerline Road, and then over 1,000 feet south, which that's the separation the city code requires, we have an emergency access for this development. I would venture to say that everybody sitting up here does not know where it is, even though it's signage as emergency access. And it's available for the fire department who know how to get into the gate and access it if necessary. But the city wants another new access. staff has, I shouldn't say staff, the city has agreed at this point in time that it would just be an emergency access, meaning it would look like this. And I don't see a display here, projector. Where do I turn it on? Oh, over here? Turn it on? Oh, it's on. Okay. How does this work? Well, let's see if we can work with some technology here. Well, okay. Oh, that's all. Oh, it is. Oh, and this mic? Oh.
You gotta give us a moment.
Is it on? Okay. Excuse me. You'll see a sign. Put my pen out here. Unfortunately, you can't read the sign, but it's right here where the pen is. There's a sign right there. And that sign says emergency access on it. Private emergency access. That's on Powerline Road right now. And it's been there since we came along, since Dr. Fisher put it in when we first started developing, with city approval. With city approval, that was allowed, that was an alternative for another main gate under city regulations at the time. On this page is just another picture of the gate. Now you can read this sign better. I know that's Powerline. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That's Powerline Road. That's the gate on Powerline. And it says entrance only, emergency only. And those are the two signs that are up at each end. One is within the development, and one is right out on Powerline Road. And this is what Dr. Fisher will be putting in at Shakespeare. Unless the city removes the requirement. But it's a city requirement, and we have no control over that. As I said before, we believe our two existing ingress and egress points are sufficient for this development. Development has been there for 12, 15 years. And
Excuse me a minute.
Pardon?
If the people in the back have conversation, please take it outdoors because it's impacting what we can hear up here, and we need to hear what's being said here. So, no conversation. If you have to have conversation, take it outside.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
Yes.
The second item that we're faced with, because we're new, we weren't a phase, which we should have been, is a public recreation requirement. And I emphasize the word public, not just recreation for the residents, but recreation for you folks, recreation for the other people in this room that, if there are any, that do not live in Cross Creek. That's a requirement in the code that when you have a new subdivision now, you have to provide recreational amenities for anybody in the city to come enjoy. In concept, it's not a bad thought, but in practicality, it doesn't work in a private development. You'll never have another private community in town. If you don't have a private community, you're going to have public roads. And you're going to have the city maintaining those public roads. The roads in the roads in Cross Creek are all private and maintained by the homeowners association, just as they are in other Dr. Fisher subdivisions. San Sebastian Springs comes to mind. Those are private roads. So we have this recreation requirement, Dr. Fisher is providing 1.82 acres of recreation. We have a 30-some-odd acre lake that we don't get credit for. That doesn't count because we're a new subdivision. Even though these people are going to be using the new lake if they choose, they'll get the benefit of it, but we don't get credit for that. Dr. Fisher has chosen to advise the city that he's not going to give public access to use these new recreational amenities that he's putting in. He chose to pay a fee to the city, a charge that the city is going to impose on him, not to allow the general public in there. And the cost of that fee is going to be the value of 1 acre of land. And that's not insignificant. He could have easily said, sure, I'll open this to the public. Wouldn't have been quite fair to the other residents in Cross Creek to do that. The new residents, the new potential residents don't even know about it, so they would have accepted it. But I assure you, those people living in there now would not have been happy because there's no separation between the new addition and Cross Creek. It's all one subdivision. So Dr. Fisher is paying out of his own pocket the cost of another acre of land to meet a city requirement that I think is extremely unfair to this subdivision because it's an existing subdivision, but more importantly, it's unfair to all new private developments that come in. You're forced to put your recreational amenities in a new subdivision on the periphery, on the border, if you don't want people coming in. So you can have a private road, I guess, but you got to have all your recreational amenities on the outside so the general public can use them. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it is the regulation, and that's what we're being saddled with. Because we're not a phased development, because we're not part of Cross Creek in the context that the city considers us to be part of Cross Creek. The new development, the Cross Creek addition, will have walking trails. It will have a lake, not as big as the existing lake, but it will have a good-sized lake in there. And that lake is available for use not only by the new residents of the addition, but all the residents within Cross Creek get to enjoy the amenities in Cross Creek addition. They get to use the hiking trails, and they get to use the new lake because it's one development. Everybody's treated alike. Next item, we're facing the streetlights. I don't know if you've been in Cross Creek in the evening or not, but we do not have FP&L streetlights in there. Every home has a yard light up near the road that provides lighting for the road, which is the city requirement for street lights. They want to have the roads lit at nighttime. So we've asked the city for a waiver, and we're asking you for a waiver, and we'll ask the city council for a waiver from the requirement to have to put in FP&L type poles. Now they do make a decorative pole, but it's not the same. So it didn't seem reasonable for Cross Creek addition to have special light poles, which is contrary to the rest of the development. So we're asking for a waiver from that requirement, and I believe staff is recommending a support of that waiver. The next item are cul-de-sac lengths. Now that's been around for a while. I can't say that's just because we're a new subdivision. Cul-de-sac length. A cul-de-sac is like basically a dead-end street. You have a big turnaround at one end of it, so you can turn around and get back out. Have a place to turn around. It provides, I guess, a turnaround if you don't have a loop road that goes all the way around. The city has a limit of 600 feet for a cul-de-sac. And this is, in my opinion, a reasonable requirement, 600 feet for the length of a cul-de-sac. We have two cul-de-sac roads, one of which is very short, probably not even 200, 300 feet. And the other one exceeds 600 feet by a few hundred feet. So what's the reason for a 600-foot length? The reason is fire protection, to make sure fire trucks can get to fire hydrants sufficiently to put a fire out if necessary. So the staff has reviewed our plans with the fire marshal for Indian River County, and the fire marshal has determined that that this subdivision is in good shape as far as fire control is concerned, and recommends the approval of the 600-plus foot cul-de-sac. They're not concerned about it. And that's the reason you have it. And if the fire marshal's not concerned about it, then it should not be an issue for the city. In addition to that, the city likes to have 2 exits out of the subdivision, or a loop road. We have one entrance and 1 exit, same road. We have, you have the plans in front of you, and I believe I can switch right down, right down. North is up here. And this is the entrance I pointed out to you before, I mentioned. This is the short cul-de-sac. I'm sorry. This is the entrance. We're right there. And this is the short cul-de-sac. And then this is the longer one here. So what we have done is we've provided a loop road. Now you're probably wondering, where's that loop road? I don't see it. The loop road starts here where my pen is, and it traverses north along here over to here. The loop road will also have a hiking trail in it, a walking trail. The loop road will also have a stabilized shell rock base, just like the emergency access I showed you earlier. And over that stabilized base will be grass. So, and that's been reviewed by the fire department. At least that's my understanding. So there is, you can drive right across that, any type of vehicle you want. It's 20 feet wide, a stabilized road. You just see grass, but beneath the grass is hard gravel, packed, to provide a driving surface, just like the emergency access routes. And then in the center, obviously, is the lake. And as I said previously, not only the residents of the addition, but the residents of Cross Creek will be allowed in here. It's part of their development. All right, where are we? Our first preliminary plat for this development was approved in 2020 by the Planning Commission, and it went to City Council and it was approved. Unfortunately, but probably appropriately, the city has a required life for a preliminary plat. The city has a required life for a preliminary plat, and that life is 18 months. 18 months. Because we didn't come back within 18 months, we have to start over. And that's why we're here tonight. We're starting over again. Because we didn't make it back in 18 months. For various reasons. So, I think that's my initial presentation for now. I'm going to step down and turn it back over to Madam Chairwoman Cottenberg, and turn it back to you folks and see where we go from there. If you have questions, we'll try our best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for our staff presentation now.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'd like to start by saying that we'd like to enter the staff report into the record. And you guys are familiar with our staff report in that all of our sheets, most of the initial sheets, we have pulled out from the code what the preliminary plat has to meet. So if we say it's provided, we're showing you that this plat meets what the code requires. I think instead of going over some of those smaller details regarding drainage, regarding landscaping, regarding some of the environmental, you can see that meets the code. This is a straight subdivision. It's not a PUD. And so with regards to, well, I can go over some of our items that we have. In terms of drainage, we have their outfall will be going into a canal south of their project that's owned by Sebastian River Improvement District. And we have gotten a letter from them that says we're okay with this preliminary drainage design. They have a few little more calculation details that they would like that will be a part of the construction drawings. With regards to lot sizes, we are in favor or recommending also to grant the adjustments for the street lights and the cul-de-sac length. So as you can see, a lot of the main issues of this is things that I'd like to respond to, Mr. Dill, is the city's opinion that this is a new subdivision, and from there, some of our conditions. When the original, and let's call it the parent subdivision, the existing Cross Creek Lake Estates, there was a preliminary plat that came before City Council in 2004. That plat was going to give Sebastian 25 feet, additional 25 feet for the Shakespeare one-way right-of-way. There was a public hearing, public came there, and they said we didn't want traffic on that street, and that council at that time said, you know what, we'll go ahead and not accept this right away. We're okay. Our code allowed them to say that you can have one entrance on Powerline Road, and it also required an emergency access on that. So they did get that approval from City Council. In 2005, when this parcel was annexed in, it having to have access to it, it was intended, and yes, it would most likely have access. We assumed it has access through the parent parcel. However, the following preliminary plats and any of the phase plans that we received between then and 2013 when the parent parcel was developed never had this parcel shown as a phase. There was no phase on a preliminary plat or a paper copy or an application that came to the city that we would have known technically that this was going to be considered as a phase. Mr. Dill is correct, though, that they added this as an addition into their HOA through documents that were approved from their HOA and were recorded at the courthouse, but nothing that was ever required to give to the city, so that we had something in writing that formally says this is another phase of Cross Creek Lake Estates. So it could have been sold to somebody else and maybe not come in. A different developer could have done it as a phase of Cross Creek Lake Estates, but no subdivision plan was ever submitted to the city. There is specific codes in Article 19 that says, even if it did come in as a phase, there's specific codes in Article 19 that state each phase must be looked at independently and be able to meet all of the codes separately as that phase. So this is coming in. We are looking at this as, we certainly accept and know that this is an addition to the Cross Creek Lake Estates, but we're not calling it a phase of Cross Creek Lake Estates. It was never on any formal phase plan that was submitted to the city. But we know that the access is going to be onto Yearling Trail in the parent parcel. There are very specific codes in both the comprehensive plan. It has always been in the old comprehensive plan, and it was carried over. You've reviewed it into the new comprehensive plan, that any subdivision that has more than 25 lots requires 2 entrances. What I'd also like to premise on that is in 2004, because we did not, at that time, River Oaks Preserve did not come in. We had not had a preliminary plat yet or seen anything for that development. And the annexation that is directly west of this property just got annexed in last year with the premise, with a condition of their annexation agreement that they had to give us the 25 feet. In 2004, in 2005, and as even at 2020, when the preliminary plat came before you, the mechanisms to extend Shakespeare Street was not feasible. We didn't have the pieces of property and the agreements with the developers to do that. Our comp plan has very specific policies and objectives for connectivity of these streets. So now that the pieces are in place, that we can extend Shakespeare Street to, in essence, to take some traffic off of the streets traffic on some of those local streets, and have the opportunity to meet the comprehensive plan that says you have to have 2 entrances for a subdivision. And even if we don't look at this addition, we also now have the opportunity to get the 2 exits for the parent parcel that is needed. Between the 134 lots that Mr. Dill mentioned in the parent parcel and the 35 that are being added, that's 169 lots. Let's round it up to 170. The average daily trips for a single-family house is like 9.8410. That is 1,700 average daily trips for this subdivision that would be currently going out of 1 entrance. And the emergency access is also on that same street. So we have a lot of traffic going to 1 area. This is going to open it up. Now, the pieces that are in play, we have an annexation parcel that may not come in for development. This is what I'm talking about is the parcel west of this property. May not come in for 8 or 9 years to develop, or even if it comes in with a PUD to go through the process. So we would like to see an emergency access or another access onto Shakespeare Street that will act as emergency until such time as Shakespeare is connected to 510 or extended down to 510. And if you remember from your public hearing from River Oaks Preserve, that may be just one way for a while, again, until the annexed parcel west of this property comes in to give us the right of way, and it's 2-way. We feel that that is taking traffic directly down to 510. It's taking some of the traffic from the neighborhood streets, and it's taking a lot of traffic off of 1 entrance onto Powerline Road. Now, once this goes back to City Council, these 2 subdivisions that are being, if Council comes back and they decide that possibly they don't want to extend Shakespeare Street, we still, per our comprehensive plans, still need another entrance for this subdivision. And now instead of having traffic head south to 510, it will be directed onto Landfair, which that's why we feel the extension of Shakespeare Street is going to take some traffic off of the neighboring streets. It'll be a left turn out, you're going right down to 510, there's your second entrance. I'd like to address some of the other things that were discussed in that the recorded documents. When the plat went before you guys in 2020, and it was 24 lots, so it was not the 25 threshold that required the second entrance. At that time, we were just requiring an emergency entrance onto Shakespeare Street. This new plat has tripped that threshold to 35 lots, which requires the second entrance. We received a petition from the property owners in Cross Creek Lake Estates. I did add that into your packet because I did want to point out something. They had 3 concerns, and we did look at this petition when we reviewed this new plat to see what their concerns are, that we would address that. I think 2 of them are very clearly addressed. They were looking for the RV and boat parking area to be added that had been promised to them. You can see that there is a tract on this plat. The site plan, it won't necessarily be that layout they kind of showed for the dimensions, but it will require a separate site plan. Administrative reviewed, we'll make sure it gets landscaping and buffering through that site plan. They had concerns about gopher tortoises, which a given, we included the environmental report in your packet, so you can see that there are no scrub jays. There may be a few gopher tortoises in that one area. It's required before they get their land clearing permit that they have to do a updated gopher tortoise survey that's within 90 days of their land clearing permit. So we certainly will take care of the environmental concerns, and that's a given for any of our subdivisions. But I'd like to point out that one of the other things that was in this petition from 2020 from the property owners it says that in the current request, talking about the 2020 application, it is recommended that the board might consider mandating a design of a second emergency access as part of the approval process. We, the homeowners, ask that it not only be mandated, but that be noted that all requirements for egressing onto the roadways be in compliance with town and country requirements before approval of the addition is given. So that was actually something, a petition that the residents had requested. So we are requesting that we have this emergency access. We are allowing it to be emergency access until there's extension down to 510, the Shakespeare extension. And we also required it on the last sheet of your preliminary plat, C8100, is a design for that. It has been civil engineer designed that it will be designed as a full access with whatever requirements that it needs to meet FDOT and city requirements for that intersection to line up with Landfair. It can then have a gate that can be put up that will be a special code that can only be used for emergency access at such time that 510 gets extended, and then we would like that to be open. Not open to the public, it just means that it can be full traffic for the residents of Cross Creek Lake Estates. Turn left, and you'll be able to go down to 510, and at some point, you'd be able then to also, from 510, access back up to that gate. But it is not intended to put any traffic north on the one-way Shakespeare, we're trying to eliminate some additional traffic that would go onto those local streets, Landfair and Lighthouse, by extending Shakespeare. So with that, staff, as you can see in our conclusions, we feel that with the access that it meets code, we're a little nervous that if that full access is eliminated, it will not meet the requirements of the subdivision section or the comprehensive plan. Let me see the other thing. With regards to the last thing I'd like to discuss is the recommendation for the recreation, the requirement. That has also always been in our comprehensive plan. The code requires, and the comprehensive plan, that you provide 4 acres of recreation for every 1,000 persons that are going to be in that subdivision. It's a calculation. The comprehensive plan and our concurrency management section in our code states that 2 acres of those 4 acres have to be neighborhood parks or recreation areas, and 2 of those acres have to be community, available for the community. That has been in our comp plan. You reviewed it for the new update. It stayed in there, and we had updated in our land development code. There was a few sections that weren't in conflict with that. So we put that all in compliance with the comp plan. So this particular site, based on the 35 lots, only needs 0.35 acres of recreation. 0.17, half of that would be for neighborhood. 0.17 would be for the community. We had offered up, so they've added their trails and certainly access to the lake, and we understand through their deed restrictions, their covenants, that these residents are going to be able to use the other lake that's there. But staff had recommended that if there was a small area, only 0.17 acres, which is about 7,000 square feet, if on Powerline Road, if there was an area that they could add a bench, something that would be for bike riders, interconnectivity. We're always looking for people that are bike riding, a place to stop. It's passive recreation. We're hoping that there'd be eventually, with some of our projects to the south, that there's this interconnectivity for bicycle riding and pedestrians. We had stated that we would accept that as the 0.17 community recreation area that they needed. It was offered in one of our staff comments. The response did come back that they weren't interested in that they would, and they don't want to open the trails to the public, that they will do the in lieu, the recreation in lieu. It just turns out that our code states that we won't consider recreation in lieu for less than 1 acre. So even though they only need 0.17 of community park area, unfortunately, the code that was established and has been in there and in the comp plan, this wasn't anything new, it's 1 acre or more. And so because they're not offering any community park area in this particular project or on even the parent parcel, the 1 acre is the minimum that we would require. And as we understood from their response, that is what they had stated they would do. So that's why that's added into our recommendations. And so I just want to go over our recommendations. So again, we agree that the preliminary plat meets all of the code requirements. Unfortunately, I think the access, if it's eliminated, I can't state then, I may have to take that back, then I don't think that the the subdivision would meet our requirements, but again, that would be for city council to make that final decision if they don't, if they remove that access. Staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat. We are recommending approval of the requested adjustments. The parent track already has this where they have to put a street lamp post on their private property that's on a timer. We are certainly okay with doing that for this new subdivision, and the cul-de-sac length, because the fire department has reviewed this, the amount of hydrants are in there, we're good with the requested adjustments. I'm just going to read into this one. This is the one concerning Shakespeare. Again, these are our recommendations for approval of this preliminary plat, that the construction of a fully designed second access point is required in the northwestern portion of the top loop of Yielding Trail at the Shakespeare Street and Landfair intersection prior to issuance of the final certificate of completion. So again, they still have to take the preliminary plat to City Council. They then submit construction drawings that go through a review. They then have to put in their infrastructure. And what we're saying is then, by that time, which could be another year, 18 months before that emergency access would have to be put in on that, and that the final design shall be included with the submittal of the additions construction plans, and shall include any improvements necessary to the aforementioned intersection so that it meets FDOT and city design standards. The maintenance of that second access would be the responsibility of the CCLE HOA, which can be gated. We have no issues with anything being gated. The second access point may be used as an emergency access only until such time as when Shakespeare Street is extended and open to County Road 512. When this occurs, the open to 510, the second access point must be open to the residents for full access. Our third condition of approval has to do with the stormwater design, that it shall be resubmitted, and any of the questions that our consulting engineer, St. John's and Sebastian River Improvement District, shall address any of those remaining comments. A recreation fee in lieu payment for 1 acre must be received and or an agreement before final platting can occur. Gopher tortoise survey will be required before land clearing. And we did put this in just so it was clear and in writing that the subdivision construction traffic for the addition parcel would have to enter from the primary entrance from Powerline Road and not from Shakespeare Street if that entrance is put in during the construction. So with that, that is our recommendation for approval of the preliminary plat.
Thank you for a very clear explanation. We're going to open this up for public input now, and I'm again going to remind you that you each have 5 minutes to make your point with us. All comments need to be addressed to the chair, and it would probably be convenient for you if when one person starts speaking, the next one comes up and like stands at the back so that we're not climbing over chairs to get back and forth. I want you to be certain to state your name clearly, speak into the microphone, and if your name isn't Smith or Jones, please spell it for our secretary. Meeting is now open to public input.
Thank you. My name is Tony Salazar, S-A-L-A-Z-A-R. I'm a resident of Shakespeare Street. We were here last month discussing the berm on the far end of that street there. With this phase 1 and 2 going in, don't have an issue with it. Don't have an issue with progress that we've talked before. Don't have an issue with emergency gates. But as you all know, Shakespeare Street and Landfair and some of those cannot handle, I guess, can I stop real quick? After the last meeting, had any of you gone down Shakespeare Street? 1, 2? So you understand what we're talking about when you come around there. We cannot handle the traffic that's going to be coming to these 2 subdivisions going in now. Like I said, I'm all for it. I wish I could live in some of these places that have the fences around them. And not to throw your words back at you, but last meeting, and even at this one, you like to use the word connectivity of neighborhoods here, which is great. But if I lived in an HOA, because you told us that for the Oaks one, connectivity neighborhoods, let's open it up. If that's the way we think, get rid of all the gates to all these places, but these people that live in there pay good money to have their privacy. And we're just trying to maintain the old town structure that we have on Shakespeare and some of these other ones. And I discussed before with the flooding and no sidewalks and no lighting. If you go down our street at night, there's one light. You can't see anything else. The people are gonna come backwards on this road. We have it every day, every day. And the minute you open up more of these subdivisions, they're gonna take the shortest path available. And I'm just here as a new resident. I don't know Mr. Fisher. They're painting him as a saint, and that's great for the stuff he's done. But for the little street I live on, I'm hoping we can kind of find an alternative method than opening up the end of Shakespeare Street to both of these areas that is just gonna overflow us with traffic. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Jeffrey Junik, that's Junek. I live on 1718 Mainsail Street. I hate bending over, it doesn't raise up, sorry. So a couple things. First of all, board, don't be fooled by someone's generosity. When we heard earlier said he gave hundreds of thousands of dollars for Powerline Road, we need to ask the question, how many millions of dollars did he make on this subdivision too? Okay. I have some questions for you guys. Have we done a study of how much traffic Shakespeare can hold today? How much traffic Mainsail Street can hold? Because listening to the staff, I have a question. It sounds like you're assuming all the traffic is going to go to Powerline Road. I don't think that's the case. People use Periwinkle every day, and Periwinkle, they speed down it. What's going to happen now when those people go from not going south toward Vero, they're going to Melbourne. They're cutting across Mainsail Street, Shakespeare, and all the other streets. We have kids in the neighborhood. The cops can't control speeding on Periwinkle as it is. Imagine the side streets now, what's going to happen, okay? Again, I don't mind emergency one, but I do mind a full open gate for access. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name's Heather Fisher, Fisher, no relation. Thought that was due. I'm on Shakespeare Street. I was here for the River Oaks Preserve discussion, and the concern remains the same. And what both of my neighbors just expressed is the traffic flow. Now we're looking at 3 subdivisions: Cross Creek, Creek Lake Estates, and River Oaks Preserve, plus the annex property whenever something's done with that. Our neighborhood doesn't have the infrastructure that all those new neighborhoods have. We don't have the nice wide streets with a sidewalk so we can continue walking our dogs, our kids riding the bikes, and communing with our neighbors. Once that traffic picks up, that's done. There's no more walking the neighborhood. There's no more communing with our neighbors as we walk. It's officially ended and is ruining our quality of life on that road. Again, the staff mentioned that they don't expect traffic on Shakespeare to increase. However, they also expressed that the reason we need a second entrance is because of the amount of traffic and the amount of daily errands that are run. So, it sounds like there is going to be more traffic. And to Jeff's point, people are going to take the shortest route, just like they do with Powerline. And if that's through our neighborhood, through Periwinkle, down Shakespeare, because it's quicker, because they don't want to mess with Barber, and they're going to do that. And usually when people try to find the shorter route, they also slow roll stop signs. As we know on the neighboring road, they also go faster than they should. And again, all of that is our neighborhood. I want to say that I'm not against the neighborhoods either, the new subdivisions. They are beautiful. I'm for progress and change that happens. It's really the traffic, all of that pouring into our neighborhood. And I have to think, one of the questions I ask myself is, why would they want to exit and go through our neighborhood? There's nothing in that direction. There's no stores, there's no anything. So what does that entrance do? Where's it taking people? They're going to want to exit through Powerline Road or to 510 or somewhere else. But if it's there, they'll use it. So it seems, I don't know, like there are some opportunities there. I'm for an emergency exit, that's fine. But again, putting all that traffic through that neighborhood in general is just going to ruin everybody's quality of life and the way we commune with our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Speak, S-P-E-A-K. I'm also reiterating everything they said. I won't go into that because they've already said it very clearly and concisely. But we do not have sidewalks. We do not have the right roads back there. You drive down Shakespeare, I have a Suburban, I hit limbs every day. It's not as wide of a road as a normal, even one-way. Even more, I work from home, and I'm out and about because I do mortgages, so I'm out and about all day long running around town. The amount of people that come back to our neighborhood to take leisurely walks with their dogs, the elderly that walk around there with their walkers because there's nowhere else for them to walk, they don't even live in our neighborhood. We welcome them with loving arms. They come and walk our streets. Sometimes they're walking most of the time the wrong way on Shakespeare, but we patiently wait for them, allow them to pass, and then we go on our way. If someone is mowing a lawn on Shakespeare, you don't go by Shakespeare. That road is completely shut down because their trailer is there and you cannot get around them. You have to back up, go to a driveway, turn around, drive down the wrong way, and go back around to come to my house on Memorial. So there's a lot more things. If you don't live back there or you don't spend some time with us, which we'd love to have you come visit our lovely area, that you're not seeing the big picture. We are not against growth. I love that neighborhood. Many of my friends live in there. I did a lot of the loans in there. It's a beautiful neighborhood. And adding on to that, if they can make it where it works for everybody, power to them. But adding on to Shakespeare is not the way. So thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane Spagnolia, S-P-A-G-N-O-L-I-A. I have more technical problems with the entrance. A UPS truck is 26 feet long. If you go and see where they want to put that entrance, you can't put a 26-foot there unless they're blocking Shakespeare coming off a Landfair or blocking Shakespeare trying to go into that access. I have asked engineering, I have asked planning, I have asked the city council to go and get an engineer to come out and look and see what you're talking about. There's no room. You can't put trucks there. God forbid a room-to-go truck comes. You've got the whole place blocked off. It's a one-way street. I don't understand why we need a two-way street all the way through. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I've lived on land for almost 30 years. It's a nice neighborhood. I'm not saying we like the people in Cross Creek. They're very friendly. We live with them, but there's no reason to put an access there. There's no room. We need an engineer. We also have a berm, which is about this much higher than Landfair. When it rains, the corners of Landfair block up rain. I've asked them, come out and look after it rains. It just does not flow. You're gonna put a road like this and the rain is gonna be worse. It's gonna go down Shakespeare either way. There are problems engineering-wise with this program of putting an access there. Emergency exit, you're still gonna have to do some kind of planning to get those from here to here in like 3 feet. If you haven't been out there, come out and see it. Have an engineer come out and see it before you say we're going to put an access there. That's all I'm asking. An emergency exit, fine. You know, we can't block progress. We understand that. God, when we bought our house, there was nobody around us, you know? So we understand progress. My thing is technical. There's no room. And I want somebody to go out there as an engineer. Even if you put an access, if you put a gate, you would not have a setback to the driveways that are in Cross Creek. You wouldn't have the right setback to an intersection of a street. I've gone through all the planning. I wish everybody would go through. It's very hard to find all your setbacks. It's kind of hidden in there, but I worked my butt off. There's not room. I want an engineer. I want you to, before you make a plan and have an access, please go out and measure. Get your setbacks and see, you can't put it there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Donna Greco, and I'm a resident of Cross Creek. I guess I'm the first Cross Creek resident to speak. G-R-E-C-O, Donna, D-O-N-N-A. Someone mentioned that there was a request by the residents of Cross Creek to have an emergency exit gate in 2020. Well, that should be expired because many of us didn't even live there in 2020. Why would we decide now that we want an emergency exit gate right by our homes? So that area where they want to have that emergency exit gate, just like everybody else said, there's no room. And there's a lot of endangered species, tortoises and other animals and environmental things that are there that are going to either have to be moved or eliminated or annihilated. And that's just not right. I think that the front entrance gate to Cross Creek is always open. There's always something wrong with it. It's never closed. How are they going to keep the other gate closed when they can't even keep the main gate closed? The main gate is open 24/7. And they say, something's wrong, it's broken. Well, then it's open, and it's open, then it's closed for a little while, and then it's open the whole time. So it's not even been being maintained. How are they going to do that when they have another gate that is connecting an HOA property to a non-HOA property that is a neighborhood that this area that they're going to put it in is so small, there's no way they're going to be able to do it. And the traffic is another issue that everybody's already talked about. I have a better idea, a better proposal. I think if you really are insistent that we have an emergency exit gate, I think you should bring it down a little ways. Down Yearling Trail, going north, on the corner, I believe it's the northeast corner of Yearling Trail, there is a lot more property. It's a bigger spot in that corner that's actually, nobody owns it. It's a property that's owned by the HOA, whatever, common area, and there's more room to actually extend a street. So why they're picking a place that has a one-way street that's so narrow it doesn't even fit a car down it, why can't they go a little farther down the road and choose an area where it just seems to be a bit more, able to accommodate it? So that is my concern about the emergency gate. He mentioned, the lawyer mentioned that it's not a new subdivision. It was in the plan. Why weren't the residents told that there was a subdivision that was planned when we all bought our properties? Developers didn't tell us. Realtors didn't tell us. Builders didn't tell us. Was it hidden in the fine print? Well, that tells me it's a little bit secretive, that there was a place that was going to, new development that was going to be created right across the street from where many of us have our homes and paid a lot of money for them, for that matter. I've attended and spoken at several board meetings in the past that have proposed modifications that alter our community, as well as land proposals that affect the city of Sebastian as a whole. But it seems to me that despite the outcry from the community, I've yet to see opposition to these development projects. I know you can't stop progress, like this other woman just said, but sometimes it's just not the right thing for the community. And when I say that the people of the 500, 600 block of Yearling Trail do not want an obtrusive emergency exit gate that's too small of an area to put it in, we know it's going to turn into an entrance gate. And somebody even admitted it, that it's going to turn into an entrance gate. It's at the foot of our property, and it's going to cause excessive traffic, construction trucks going in and out, debris, because the construction trucks are dropping debris constantly all over the place. And it was once a peaceful street. And it's going to lead out to an extension of Shakespeare Street, which will undoubtedly become a thoroughfare for residents, non-residents, and everybody else that wants to cut through. And like this other woman said, I agree that people speed when it's not their community. They just go speeding through. And that's going to be a major problem that everybody's going to have to deal with. And that also creates a decrease in property values. I just think that, well, on your application to become a member of the zoning board, you signed a paper that clearly states, I will represent the best interests of the entire city while serving as a board member. And I hope that you will represent the best interests, because it seems when we all speak, it all falls on deaf ears. I've yet to have come to a meeting that everybody votes in favor of these development projects. where, you know, does anyone care that it's not in the best interest of our community if you don't live in our community? I just think that there's a lot of impact on, it's going to be impact on schools, roads, necessary services
excuse me.
like police, fire, water use,
Excuse me?
taxes.
Excuse me? You're approaching the end of your time limit. Please
Okay.
wrap it up.
I just want to make sure that the gate gets considered properly, and there's some traffic studies about what's going to be happening during these roads that are going to be, you know, a lot of traffic's going to be going through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tammy Salazar. I just have a question. What is the speed limit on my street? Because I don't have a clue. Do we have a speed limit sign? Because nobody does the speed limit. That's a big concern. There is a blind spot on our road. I've almost got hit there as soon as Shakespeare starts
Excuse me,
after the turn.
I don't know what street you're talking about.
Oh, Sebastian, we're discussing, yes. I'm sorry.
Residential streets in
Yes,
Sebastian are
Sebastian.
generally 30 miles per hour.
Okay, I don't know where the speed limit sign is. I honestly don't. When it starts on my street, where it turns, there's a blind spot. I've almost got hit there.
And which is your street?
Shakespeare,
Thank you.
yes. Am I talking loud enough? Shakespeare Street. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, all I'm concerned about that I don't understand is, so when these entrance and exits are going to be open, so I have to stop walking on my street, I have to stop bike riding, okay? I don't see how that's fair. I found the house that I love, that I wanted to live in, and now you guys are gonna change things to the point where my quality of life isn't gonna be very much fun. We're gonna be living on Barber. So how am I gonna be able to ride my bike or go for a walk or walk my dog? I'm in shock. I'm in shock that it was one thing that you're gonna open one side, but now you're saying there's two gonna be open? And they go the wrong way all the time. There's the wrong way all the time. We're shouting, you're going the wrong way. There's only one way, they say. Yeah, you're going the wrong way. They don't care. There's no cops around to stop them. It's a big concern. Unless you live on the street, you would understand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Jameson, and I live in Cross Creek Lake Estates. Last name Jameson, Jameson. I'm just going to reiterate a few things that other people have talked about here tonight, mostly in regards to the emergency gate that may or may not be an emergency gate. It's going to end up not being a gate that just the fire department and ambulance will use. If you come out to our neighborhood and see the difference in elevation and the amount of space there is to put this gate in, especially once you open Shakespeare all the way to 510, it's a blind area to come out of to begin with. It is going to be a problem once Shakespeare goes out to 510. I haven't heard of any traffic studies. I did see in the report that there was a traffic study done in our neighborhood, which wasn't in there, but because it didn't have to be, because of the amount of cars that are going to be coming out of the new part of the division, which I have no problem with Mr. Fisher building this, because you know it's going to be part of our neighborhood. But we already have an emergency exit. We already have a front gate that may or may not be closed every time I come in. Sometimes at 10 o'clock at night it's open, sometimes at 6 o'clock in the morning, when I rarely go out that early, it's open. And my issue is this gate that's going to go on the west, I guess you would call it the northwest corner, is gonna be the same thing. And if you're gonna have people coming from 510 to come through, and I feel sorry for the people that live on Shakespeare. I walk my dogs down the street, and I see that. I walk right next to Shakespeare. I can't tell you how many times I see cars coming the wrong direction. And people are, and I hear the neighbors, you're yelling, hey, you're going the wrong way. Now you're gonna multiply that by how many more cars are gonna come into that area. I really do feel bad that they're gonna do it. But what's gonna happen for us is if that gate isn't closed, which if it's an emergency gate, it should be closed. But we already have another one. So I don't understand that whole issue. But again, having that gate there is just gonna cause more problems for the people that live in here in Cross Creek Lake Estates. I don't see the need for that if we already have an emergency gate on the other side. And the other issue was talked about was the turtles. Like I said, I walk there almost every day, probably every day, and I do see turtles. And there are turtle nests right where this road is going to come out if they do build it. The other issues, water, because we sit higher than Shakespeare, during heavy rains, that water will be funneling out through that gate, underneath that gate and out into that neighborhood. It's not gonna go into it's gonna find the easiest way out. And the easiest way out is gonna be, because we are that much higher, that road will have to be built to go down to meet that Shakespeare. So, you have issues that really, unless you come out and actually look it over and see how the land is, I think that you're making a decision blindly, and I think that you really do need to come out and look this over. And there's always compromise in developments. I've seen it in many places where I lived and worked. And just because somebody says, "Oh, you have to have that because this is now a second addition. It's not part of Cross Creek Lake." There can be compromises made. Like I said, we already have an emergency gate in the front on 70th, and it's far enough apart from the other one that it met the code at the time. So, let's actually come out and look at it and see what we have there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Jose Barradas, Barradas. I'm going to try to use my best English to be understandable. I come from a country where my kids were playing inside my apartment daily because it was not possible go to the parks or outside because it's unsafe. When I moved to Sebastian with my family 5 years ago, we literally find the paradise. We live in peace. I have 3 kids growing happiness. I would like to show in that screen my kids riding bikes in the street, running. I can show my camera in front of my house, showing that it's not a picture. The thing is that nothing happened. Nothing happened in hours. I got relatives from my country that come to my house to relax themselves because they live in Orlando, they live in Miami. So the only thing, and I think the right word that I can use is I come to beg everybody here to make a decision very conscious, not thinking just in the business, not thinking just in the city that is growing. The city is made by the people. Without people, it's no city. And I think what we want is everything correct. I'm not saying that not make that neighbor, that development, but trying to find another way. When we have around our area any yard sales, I need to tell my kids don't play outside because it's not a speed control on that area. Shakespeare right now is a highway. It's a highway. It's dangerous. I was thinking, and I talked with my neighbor that he couldn't come, try to put a bump in front of my house to control the speed when that happened. So I'm not asking to change the plan. They can build their house, but in the other side of the forest. We talk about just turtles. Every time that we build a house in our area, we have also bobcats that they are moving to that forest. Where they're gonna be moving after that. So I just wanna be very, very short, but give it this message. We live in a good country, and we are blessed to be here because a lot of people doesn't know what happened out of this country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Evening, Board. Jerry Hammock, Hammock, like the one hanging up between two trees. I live on Landfair. I'm also a former truck driver, retired if you will. There is no way that you're gonna turn any kind of a large vehicle from Landfair or from Shakespeare into Cross Creek Estates. There's no way, unless you make that about 4 times wider than it needs to be. Because a large truck just cannot turn that sharp because that easement and access off of Shakespeare into there is not that roomy. There's not that much room. It's gonna force all of that traffic onto Landfair. Like I said, I live on Landfair. I moved here 3 years ago to get out of the north. I hate snow and ice. I love it down here, and I hate to see our area destroyed. It's a nice, quiet, peaceful residential area. We live on the backside of the lake there, Landfair Lake Park. I love it. Don't want to go anywhere else, but I hate to see it change. The folks want to live over there. God bless them. I don't want an HOA because I don't want somebody telling me that I can't fly my American flag in my yard. I don't want somebody telling me what color I have to paint my house. I am a retired military also. My flag flies 24/7. It is lit at night. And I've heard too many horror stories. Hope you take us into consideration, give us some courtesy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dennis Griffith, Griffith. Hi, I live in Cross Creek Estates. I am about 2 houses away from where the fence would terminate and the gate would be put in. I haven't heard anybody talking in favor of the fence. Obviously, there was a petition to do that, but it sounds like most of the people are kind of in my same state of mind that it's not going to be beneficial for the people on Shakespeare or necessarily the community. And the community's existed in at least 10 years with the current gates. If there was an emergency, I guarantee my truck could get through that cheesy fence if needed. But if emergency happened, I think most of the people in traffic patterns would come through the main gate, and that would be the primary ingress for any emergency vehicles. And likewise, there are several ways to get out of the property if needed. The green space and the new houses, I don't think anybody's really spoken against having those and trying to figure out any of the violations or the challenges there. But adding that traffic just seems unnecessary. If you do a traffic survey or you live in the community, the main gate is very lightly used. The streets are wide. The new addition of 35 houses is not going to, in my opinion, change that traffic pattern significantly, and it'll put all the traffic out onto 70th, and that's much better suited for the traffic. In the long run, if they did have to punch to the 510, maybe a consideration would be to put a road on the far south end of all those properties and keep Shakespeare intact without having any roads or any thoroughfare for the community that lives there and not impact the way that their housing is currently situated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Jeff Carrier, C-A-R-R-I-E-R, you know. I'm a resident of Landfair. I'm a little concerned by the lack of visitation to our area on the part of the commission. I think had you visited, two of you have, you would see just how narrow Shakespeare is. It's very difficult to get a large vehicle down there. I own a pickup truck, and I don't exceed 30 miles an hour as I go through this area, because it is very narrow and it's potentially a dangerous street to begin with. I think that accommodating a large amount of traffic would be a tremendous impact to this particular area. It's also worth noting, and in the interest of full disclosure, I am a member of the Natural Resources Board, and this particular area has been of interest to us because of the number of gopher tortoise burrows that are along this small strip of land that separates the division. On the left-hand side of Shakespeare as you go through there, those burrows are variously occupied and sometimes not so much occupied, but that'll have to be part of your environmental impact study. If we decide to do anything with Shakespeare, it'll be important to note that. I'm also a little bit concerned by our discussion of just exactly how private the roads are in these subdivisions and how restricted the natural areas will be to the public visiting them. And yet we're demanding so much of public roads already to give access to a private area. It strikes me as being a little contradictory here. I think there will have to be compromises as we move along. I don't know the best alternative for that. City Council can do that on the basis of your recommendations. In 2004, we actually waived the requirement for a second access point. That might be revisited. As Shakespeare is extended, presumably two directions beyond its existing terminus at Lighthouse right now, why not move the full access down to the newer area that's going to be constructed there? And the emergency gate, if in fact it does remain an emergency gate at the intersection of Landfair and Sebastian, would then be unnecessary. It could continue to exist as an emergency access. But why not just move the permanent access a mile down the road? It would ease a lot of the concerns that we have. And if the one-way nature of Shakespeare is preserved, then the impact would be minimal. I'm also concerned about the comprehensive land plan, which we discussed quite a bit in your presentation. I'd point out to you that one of the tenets of the comprehensive plan says that new development shall take into consideration and not modify and alter the existing climate of existing neighborhoods. They're to be preserved and maintained. And the quality of life in those neighborhoods is to be maintained. I think that what we've heard from so many people already, and perhaps more to follow, is that in fact the proposed development here is not going to maintain the integrity and quality of life of this neighborhood. And I'd ask you to take that into consideration. One alternative may be for you, as you consider approving what staff is recommending, perhaps you separate out the access portion. Either that or defer your final judgment on this plan until you've had a chance to look at this in a little bit more detail and consider some other alternatives to this. And I think there probably is a way to separate this secondary access because it's very clear that it's the most important concern of the people who've spoken to you tonight. And I share their concern as a resident of this area. And finally, we've had a couple of emergencies on Landfair from time to time, and we've had fire engines and emergency vehicles come down there. This is a sight to see. There are no sidewalks. This is a narrow street to begin with, and When we have a tanker truck or an emergency vehicle come down there to try to fit on that road, it's a challenge. And I can only imagine that trying to get through a gate as secondary access into the subdivision by a rather large fire engine would be certainly a challenge. I would not want to be the driver. Thank you for your
Thank you, sir.
consideration. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Scott Carmine, C-A-R-M-I-N-E. I also live on Shakespeare Street. I've lived there for 20 years, and I love it. We love our neighborhood, and we want to keep it the way it is. We are very concerned about this emergency exit. And to the gentleman that spoke about Powerline Road, I've been a sheriff since 1995, and I've been retired for 2 years now. I patrolled Powerline Road. It was a dirt road, half of it, and then paved into the city of Sebastian. So I know that area. And the houses south of Cross Creek are in the unincorporated area of Indian River County. And as other residents have said, we have people going down our road the wrong way every day. And we are so afraid of having a major accident. When you come on to Shakespeare, it's two-way in the beginning, and then it turns into one-way. And we're waiting for, I hope I don't see, just like this van that comes down my road past my house the wrong way and causes a major auto accident. For 25 years, I've handled auto accidents, fatalities. It's not a pretty sight. And I'm concerned just like everyone else. And that's why we're here. And please, come out to my neighborhood and drive our streets and drive Cross Creek. And I have friends who live in Cross Creek. Because one that lives here, his parents were my next door neighbor for 17 years. And they're my second family. So please, please come out and drive our roads, and you will see what we're talking about. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is Bruce Stoll, S-T-O-L-L. I live on Landfair Avenue. One of the other concerns that I have that I haven't heard about is the plotting on the west end of Landfair and Lighthouse. There was some work being done there, like some roads being cut through, and there was all kinds of no trespassing signs. And I've seen the plots where the areas are plotted out for building or for housing. I don't know what the future is with that. I'm just concerned that if that gets built up, that's going to add additional traffic to the area, which everybody's concerned about. I may be speaking out of my butt here, I apologize, but it just seems like that's going to be another issue down the road for additional traffic in our neighborhood where it's nice and quiet. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
How you doing? Norm Tessier. I'm on Seashore. T-E-S-S-I-E-R. Okay. It sounds like the emergency gate is going to evolve into a full-time gate. And it's easy to say, they're going to come out the gate, take a left, go to 510. What if you want to go to Periwinkle? You're not going to go down, you're not going to take a left. You're going to go straight down Landfair. You're going to catch all these streets in that neighborhood, cutting in and out. Am I correct? Am I correct? Would you take a left and go all the way to 510 and go all the way back around again? No, you're going to go through these neighborhoods. Streets that can't handle it. Kids that are riding their bicycles, they're having a good time. How many kids play outside today? Not that many. You finally get some kids that are having a good time outside and you're going to run traffic over them. And I would welcome any one of you to come and visit me. I'll take you back there. I'll show you what the streets are. I'll show you what the end of Shakespeare looks like and what they want to do to it. And I'll tell you something else. I was here when Power Line Road was done, okay? And it wasn't done voluntarily, let me tell you. You know why they did it? He tried getting down Shakespeare, and it didn't happen. Check your records.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I have someone on Zoom as well.
You have someone?
I have a person on Zoom with their hand raised.
Okay.
Mr. Stadelman,
Yes, it is.
go ahead and speak, please.
Hi, my name is Charles Stadelman. I'm a resident of Sebastian. I'm also a member of the Natural Resource Board and the current chairperson, and as well as with the local Sebastian Rotary Club. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I'd like to thank the board for holding such an important public hearing and taking the time to hear everybody in the public and to weigh what they're saying. I'd like to give the board an option that they could consider, and this comes from everything that I'm hearing tonight. I've heard a lot of talk about connectivity. I've heard a lot of talk about trails and parks. We've looked at how the impact to surrounding communities are. It sounds like a lot of impact development. And I'd like to give the board an option of maybe referring this to another board to get their opinion, the Natural Resource Board, which we're very, very much in our wheelhouse to do based on the resolutions passed both for the creation of the Natural Resource Board, R2309. The mission of the board is to improve the quality of life in Sebastian and the balance of the citizens in our environment. I'm also hearing a lot of other things that relate to the people who live there, but the biosphere that it's in. The gopher turtles, we're all familiar with, but I've heard gopher turtles, bobcats, lakes, which would include other wildlife, fish, of course, everything like that. And I don't believe that you've been given the full scope of what's available to you to make a good decision on what you're asking to be done tonight. The Natural Resource Board hasn't looked at this at all, and we're currently working on everything from low impact development, connectivity, sidewalks. Everything that you're talking about is what we work on, but yet it hasn't gone to our board. So I'd like to offer the board an option of asking the city council if the Natural Resource Board could review this, and then we could also have public input based on everything we've heard tonight, connectivity, trails, the animals that live there, and then you could get our experience as well, everybody in the board. We have everybody from Teacher of the Year to doctors and scientists, real environmentalists. We're working on the mapping and planning of roads and everything that's connected with sidewalks and connectivity of trails. Everything that you've spoken about, Natural Resource Board does. And I'd like to give you the option of at least utilizing another board. You know, perhaps you could defer this or ask the city council to defer this if it's possible. We'd be we could take it up on our agenda. With everybody there, I'd like to remind everybody that the International Coastal Cleanup is on September 16th, 2023. You can register down at Riverview Park. We're going to have a booth down there. But you can pick up garbage just about anywhere.
Excuse me, Charles. We just can't take any advertising here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments, though. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay. I am thinking that is the end of our public comment. Anybody else on Zoom?
No,
Okay.
ma'am.
Madam Chairman,
Okay.
at this time, before you start your deliberation and action, I would just like to remind you, and this is also for the public, that at this time you would need to disclose any ex parte communications, site visits, which are presumed prejudicial, and which is why they would need to be disclosed at this point, not earlier upon questioning, as well any investigations and any research or any recusals in the matter. This would be the appropriate time for that, not during, the public input. As well, I would like to remind you that you will be considering only competent, substantial evidence, not lay opinions, and as well, no testimony by other board members should be given give greater weight than any other testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff, do you have a final summary and recommendation?
Yes, I'd like to address a few of the things. I'm not going to take a long time because I know you want to get to your questions and deliberation. I do want to verify this is a recommendation to City Council. This is not the final decision. This does still have to go to City Council. Most likely October 11th, letters would be sent out for that hearing. I also wanted to remind you, and just for the audience too, and then I want to clarify a few things. A lot of these codes that are in between the comprehensive plan and the code, these are codes that are not just randomly from staff. They have gone before this board and previous councils, and they are looked at for the safety and protection of and the welfare of our residents. So they aren't just random code requirements, and I'm specifically speaking about the second entrance because we all know that that is what's here. From the last meeting that we had from River Oaks Preserve, there was a lot of people that came and spoke about the Shakespeare, the cars going on runway. I had stated, and I did, contact the city engineer department and our roads division to have them look at that. And I know that Karen has reached out to her staff if there was some additional signage and striping on that street. So that has been, those concerns have been relayed to our engineering department. The other, I wanted to clarify also is that between this subdivision and our River Oaks Preserve, at no time are we requiring or requesting that the one-way street of Shakespeare be made into a two-way street, or that it accommodates some additional traffic. The gentleman mentioned that the comp plan also stated that we're not supposed to disrupt the neighborhoods. I do want to clarify that for tonight, for this subdivision, the Shakespeare Street extension is not part of this subdivision's consideration. That has to do, the only place that comes into place is the River Oaks Preserve. They are the ones that are going to be giving the city, per their conceptual plan, if it is approved by City Council, the right of way to connect Shakespeare Street down there. And that is going to be a decision with that site plan, with that conceptual PUD plan, with that subdivision, if the Shakespeare Street is connected. If at that meeting that Shakespeare has decided not to be extended, the code still remains that the subdivision needs to have two entrances. And then, yes, there is a lot more traffic that's going to be put onto Landfair going out that entrance. It has to be a two-way entrance. Our compromise is that, hey, if Shakespeare does get extended, we will allow this to be emergency access until we can get the traffic off of the local roads onto the Shakespeare Street extension down there. And the part of Shakespeare Street that will be mostly affected is between Landfair and Lighthouse. Otherwise, the rest of the way of Shakespeare extension down to 510 is along the River Oaks Preserve subdivision. And so looking at our aerial, there are two houses where that may be a little bit of traffic between Landfair and Lighthouse, but then the rest of the traffic going down to 510 will be along the River Oaks Preserve subdivision. But that is a decision to extend Shakespeare with that subdivision that is going to be held at City Council next week, if they want. If they come and decide that they don't want to extend Shakespeare, the requirement to still have the two entrances still is on this plat. And that would put all that traffic onto going down Landfair to Periwinkle to get to Barber Street, to then go where it wants, back onto Power Line if you want to go down to Vero, or Barber Street if you're going north into the Sebastian shopping district. So staff had looked at this as being the best way to preserve those local roads by extending Shakespeare and only having that down there, where we are not going to, there is no requirement for any developer to widen or even try to get 2 lanes, affecting the one-way Shakespeare Street right now. Again, the two-way to be able to go down, back, and up from 512 is all contingent on that annex parcel that's west of the Cross Creek Lake Estates addition. And again, we have no idea when that would be, when that come in. So if Shakespeare is decided to be extended, but the annex parcel doesn't come in for 7-8 years, it'll just be a one-way down to 510. I want to say that, so I know the residents have said, we wish you would go out there so you could see it. We do have an engineer. The engineer, Shoki Biddle and Stoddard, Mr. Joe Shoki, did go out. Based on the survey and the elevations, he has come up with a plan for that access. Now, that it is going to have to address, when it comes in for the construction drawing, and we see, at that point, we're seeing how much base is under there. There's a full drainage design too. There may have to be a pipe under here. This has to go through Sebastian. We do not want a lot of water going onto our local streets. So this will have to be designed so that it meets FDOT requirements as an intersection. It may be, because Shakespeare is to the north a one-way, it might be a right-in only, and then a right-out, left out. So that has to be all designed. Our compromise was to allow it to be emergency access until it can be a full entrance. There is that requirement that you need you need 2 entrances. And through River Oaks Preserve, if City Council decides not to extend Shakespeare, that requirement still stands for this. And then it is going to put some additional traffic on Landfair. Powerline Road, I can explain real quick with the traffic studies. When the parent Cross Creek Lake Estates came in and it did a traffic study, the threshold at that time was 200 trips. And that is another reason why that power line had to be extended, because otherwise, if they kept that entranceway and all that traffic went onto Barber Street, again, it required an off-site improvement. It was to extend power line down to and improve that road to, again, get traffic off of some of our local roads. The addition did not meet that 400 threshold trip, so a full traffic analysis was not required. As we discussed at the conceptual plan for River Oaks Preserve, that is certainly going to trip that threshold. That was just the conceptual plan. When they come in for the preliminary plat, that's when that full traffic analysis will be. It will take into consideration the extension of Shakespeare, how much traffic is going to go on those local roads. This did not trip that, and as we say, it's minimal, but it is going to dish traffic. So there wasn't a full traffic analysis required for this plat. River Oaks, you will see that. And also wanted to remind you that one of your conditions that you added for the River Oaks Preserve was that on the Shakespeare extension and to the north, that there was traffic calming devices to be looked at. So these both subdivisions they kind of have to be looked at the big picture, but with this one specifically on its own, it's not the extension of Shakespeare that is down to 510 that is in consideration tonight with this, because there are no plans for this subdivision to give us the right-of-way to do that. That's with the River Oaks Preserve, if that makes sense. And again, we recommend approval with the conditions noted in the staff report, and any other questions that you'll have will. And I know at this point the applicant can also be available for questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. The hearing is hereby closed, and the board will now deliberate and take action. And we'll start with Mr. Carter.
I have no questions.
Okay. Yes, sir.
It's my turn?
It's your turn.
Okay. I just had a couple questions. So when Shakespeare comes, it's one way. You go around the turn, there's Shakespeare's one way. The emergency exit's supposed to dump out onto Shakespeare there, but you said it's only supposed to be an emergency exit, and then Shakespeare keeps going around the corner into the neighborhood. So where would the emergency vehicles have to come from then? They would have to come around the backside of the neighborhoods, right?
So we are calling it emergency access with the assumption for it would work both ways. For access to emergency vehicles, possibly, most likely they would come in through the main entrance or the other entrance off of Powerline Road, but also for vehicles to get out. If there was some sort of fire or flooding, that they could not use any of those entrances on Powerline Road, this is another emergency access for those residents to get out for the safety of them. Most likely, this is going to be used, again, as the emergency exit for that reason, to get out, because it is going to be easier for fire trucks and ambulances to use the Powerline Road entrance to get into the subdivision.
And then you talked about all that road work that had to be done on Shakespeare as far as the draining issues and to make that.
Not on Shakespeare Street, the whole street, at this entrance, at the second entrance.
Yeah,
where Yearling, the entrance from Yearling to line up with Landfair and create an intersection that meets FDOT and city standards.
So is the city responsible for that conversion or the developer?
The developer.
They would pay for all that?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's all I had.
Okay, my concern is number 2, which has to do with the emergency access. I can't see making it a fully designed emergency access, because when I worked for the city and started in 1985, they were still talking about extending Shakespeare to 510, and it hasn't happened yet. So it can be an emergency access for another 30 years. So I don't see a point in making them construct it into a fully designed emergency access, just a grass gate like they have currently on the other section, phase 1, which I consider this phase 2, even though we're not calling it that. That's my concern, and my number 2, if I was to approve this, would just be that it would be an emergency access closer to the Landfair section rather than the Shakespeare section, because I worked for the city for over 30 years, and Shakespeare is a mess. So Landfair is at least two-way, it's, 2 lanes, but Shakespeare is not.
No more.
And an emergency exit would only be used in an emergency.
But please, I'm sorry.
Public input is finished right now. This is board deliberation. And I thank you for your patience.
That's my only concern.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, don't have a whole lot of questions. But Dory, again, for the sake of the people in the room, this is preliminary. How much leeway between preliminary and getting to construction and final?
So this is where it's different from a PUD. The PUD, you look at a conceptual first. This is a straight zoning subdivision. If you approve the preliminary plat, this is the design, and this is city council, and through your recommendations, this is it. The next step is to come in with construction drawings. Now it's the exact base of the road, the amount of asphalt, the final design, because this will have to be tweaked to based on our condition to become available to a full access. And then it can go into final plating. So again, with concerns with Ms. Kitchen, I know that we've said this, so in 2004 and 85, we did not have the property or the means to get the extension down to 5 to 10. We do now. We've got the annexation agreements and the subdivision. Will it happen? Maybe. It all depends on the annexation. But when it does, we won't have a chance to go back and say, hey, this has to be a full entrance. Now you have to make it designed so it's a full entrance. We'd rather have that full entrance designed with the gate, with the condition that it's emergency access, and until then when it is, Shakespeare Street gets extended 5 years, 10 years, It's there. We won't have the mechanisms to go back to the developer or the HOA to say, now you've got to make it a full entrance. So we would get that now at this point, maintain it as keep it as an emergency exit, but it's there when Shakespeare is extended down.
Okay. And the only other comment I have is we are bound by the city codes. And unfortunately, feelings sometimes don't get written into the codes. And if the code does give access and allowance for projects like this to be built, we may be able to tweak a little, but we can't deny on feelings. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So, Dory, I have a question. Surprise. So this addition is being, the entrance, the current ingress and egress is the existing entrance on the existing Cross Creek. Are they creating a new entrance?
Yes, the one that we're proposing on Shakespeare and Landfair.
No, that's an emergency exit that's being proposed.
No. It's required to be a full entrance, but we are allowing it to be an emergency access until Shakespeare is extended to 510. It has to be designed as a full entrance. When Shakespeare, with the addition of the annex parcel and River Oaks Preserve, when through their off-site developments, they will be able to connect Shakespeare down to 510. At that point, it needs to be a full access. We are allowing it to be because we don't want a lot of the extra traffic to have to go onto Landfair, because we know that's a concern, that is I don't want to say compromise, but that's a compromise, that we're allowing it to be an emergency access until such time as Shakespeare is extended down to 510. With the condition that it has to be designed as a full access, because we won't be able to go back and make it a full access.
But it's being.
So that's the confusion, is that we call it an emergency access, but it will need to be designed as a full accessible entrance for the Cross Creek Lake Estates residents, not for the public, but for those residents in both the addition and the parent parcel.
I'm perplexed then of how we can approve something on the idea of the future, that it's an entrance, but when we're not requiring it to be an entrance now.
So if that's a hiccup for you, we can remove that then and say that to meet code, this has to be a full entrance. And because Shakespeare does not go down to 510 yet, those residents in both the addition and the parent parcel will now go down Landfair to get to Periwinkle, because it'll be a full entrance. And that's what you need to do to meet code, that it has to be designed as a full entrance.
So where is their emergency exit then, if that's going to be the main entrance?
They have an emergency access off of Powerline Road, an existing one.
The existing one.
And there's nothing in the code that says you need an emergency access. The code says you need 2 full accesses. It says if you cannot provide 2 full accesses, then you must have one emergency access, which was the case in 2004 and the case in 2020. Because there was no way to get to the Shakespeare Street in 2004, and it had no extension down there. And the city council at that time said, we don't want an entrance on Shakespeare, so they allowed them to have the emergency access. The code states you have to have 2 full entrances. If you cannot, and you can show reason why you cannot have 2 full entrances, then you're allowed to have an emergency access. There's nothing in the code that says you have to have an emergency access. You have to have 2 full entrances.
Okay. Then the board could recommend non-approval on the basis of not requiring, because we don't want to see a second entrance.
I'm not sure on that, because again, we have no past paperwork that showed this as a phase of Cross Creek Lake Estates. And so I don't know where this then would get their emergency access. So we're using the emergency access for both the addition and the parent.
But it's connected to the existing?
Yes.
Okay. And then another quick question, the fee that Fisher is willing to pay in lieu of, the in lieu fee, Where does that fee, what's it get allocated to?
It would go into our recreation and park. So every new home right now, they pay an impact fee that goes into a recreation trust fund. And depending on, there's 5 zones in the city, so it would go into probably whatever that zone is. It goes back into the city to use for parks and improvements and acquisition of additional park properties.
Okay. I think that's all I have.
Ms. Battles?
Okay, so I just want to mention before I ask my questions, because I have quite a few. So I have a good friend that lives on Landfair. I've walked the streets with my kids, so I know the area. Just wanted to mention that, because I know a couple of you guys said only 2 of us up here have been there. I've been there quite a few times. Second thing I wanted to mention is, so I'm a civil engineer by trade, so some of my questions are going to come from that angle, but I just wanted to mention that as well before I start my questions. I'm going to keep the access question second. I'm going to ask my other questions first. How is the community going to be serviced by trash? Is it waste management on each parcel?
That can be answered by the applicant, Mr. Fisher or Mr. Dill?
Or is there a communal area for trash? Is waste management going to be going through these roads and around these roundabouts?
I think I can answer that.
Yeah. Can you come up? Because I got a few other questions.
We'll keep it on Stoddard. I'm not Joe, I'm much taller. Jeff, B-A-R-K-E-T-T. I'm not 100% certain on your trash, but I'm sure it's the local service provider. Take your recyclables and your trash can down to the road and they pick it up.
And the reason I mentioned,
I'm guessing
so
that's not 100% sure.
yeah, the reason I mentioned, because I live in another Fisher community, and there's issues with rutting in these roundabouts from the trash trucks, and that's been a common theme in our community. And so I would just say when it gets to that point, you guys should look at what surface you're putting in those roundabouts.
Totally
so
with
that,
you. We've redone several roundabouts, cul-de-sacs throughout the county. And Joe and I have actually come up with a little bit of a design for that. I'm not going to let you in on it, but it might be there.
Okay, good. Okay, so I got another question for you. Was the emergency access road that is also going to be used as a trail part of the open space calculations that you guys were?
I think it is, yes. Because it's completely grass. You'd never know that it's stabilized underneath that can carry the fire truck down it.
Okay, but you have some sort of other path on top of the stabilized, so I'm just wondering what material is that? Is that just gonna be grass, but you guys have like a trail kind of running through it?
In the cross sections in the rear, I think it's gravel. I'm not 100% sure on that.
I apologize.
On sheet C503, there should be a very specific cross-section of that. And I am sorry, mine is too small, but if you look at section F, I think it's right there on the right a little bit.
Okay, I mean, it calls out a 6-foot trail, it just doesn't.
And
I'm
you know,
assuming the whole
honestly-
thing's gonna be stabilized, including the trail.
Oh, for sure. The
Yeah.
trail's gonna be on top of the stabilized road.
Okay.
And again, this is preliminary plat, so it's not 100% construction plans right now. And I'm sure all of that'll wash out, you know, when we submit to the city for construction.
I guess my question was, is that area being applied to your open space requirement?
It is.
For the city? Okay. The entry area up here, there's some kind of weird thing going on. Is that access for mailboxes, or like what's,
A little pull out there?
yeah,
Yeah, it is. The postal service or whoever dictates it now requires, new subdivisions as of a few years ago to have that.
okay. And staff took a look at that configuration, and there's no issue with the conflicting movements and,
No, where the mailbox area is?
yeah,
No, and there was, our fire, marshal and fire review have also looked around for turnarounds and all that, yes. They
just
have
a
reviewed
little
that.
unique. Okay, so now I'll ask my questions about the access.
That's it for me?
You may be able to answer these questions. You might want to stay there for a second. So who owns the property that the existing emergency access is on?
The one on Powerline?
Yes.
The HOA. It's a tract per that plat for that subdivision that is dedicated to the HOA for ownership and maintenance.
Okay. Who owns the property that the city is proposing emergency access be to Shakespeare?
The same. It's a tract from the plat for the subdivision owned and maintained by the HOA.
Okay.
And we have a letter from the HOA, because in the 2020 preliminary plat, we had required that there also, and we had a letter from them that said that it would be okay to go across that tract.
Okay. Can someone show me where I travel Powerline Road, I promise, like almost every day. But can someone show me on the location map or somewhere on the aerial where the existing emergency access is?
This vicinity map, we do not really think that
The location map's a little more zoomed in.
Yeah, and we didn't bring anything from the parent track because it was this, but it is, if this is the entrance, let me get my bearings, the entrance is right there. It's not more than 1,000 feet away from that. Here's Powerline Road running right here. I believe it's going to be right about there. So right in here, I apologize, and right there. Yes, right there. Down here? Okay, right there.
Can you mark on that, like with a pen, where the tract is?
Okay, with regards to the subdivision tract, the one that was approved, if this was moved, it must have gone to another tract, but it was about 1,000 feet from the original entrance. There were 3 lots that were going to be a clubhouse and tennis courts, and it was right south of that, which those lots then became residential lots, but it was right there. I apologize that I don't have a larger map for that.
Okay. As it relates to the location of the proposed access, I have a question for you. Yeah. Sure. Do you know approximately what the distance is from the edge of pavement of Shakespeare and the edge of pavement of? Yes, thank you.
I don't, but again, if you look at the cross sections on sheet 803. And again, this is preliminary plat, so it's not fully designed, but there's your.
I don't have that sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, you can take mine. Again, this is just preliminary plat, so it's pretty are good, but it's not 100% construction plan.
No dimension, but
Well, that's, we're not in construction yet.
I don't blame you, I just. Oh, go ahead.
He's gonna do it in just a second.
So if I can answer the question.
Approximately, what's the distance between the edge of pavement of Shakespeare and the edge of pavement of Yearling? Looks to be maybe 15 feet, maybe?
I would be 100% guessing.
I see a 12.5 dimension there.
Right?
Is that dimensioning the width of Shakespeare?
I'm sorry.
On the top one.
Right.
See the 12.5? Is that the width of Shakespeare?
Right there.
No, Sarah, that is if you read the note, as you can see, just east of that 12.5, there is that slashed line. That is the area that has to be cleared and flat to accommodate a sliding gate and to remove the trees and berm. And it's a 12 and a half, I believe it's a 12 and a half foot length. That's how I read that.
Okay. So I guess, Dory, my question to you would be, if we were going to, as a city, request an entrance with a gate, what amount of queuing would we require of that gate?
So I don't say a trick question, but we're working with some existing roads and
I hear, I'm saying a brand new, there's ample space.
I'm going to state that probably has something to do with, there's not a specific in our code for queuing. More queuing for drive-through restaurants and things like that.
Okay.
But it may have something to do with the gate for fire truck access also. The gate's going to have to be, I believe that they have some requirements. You can't have that gate so that a fire truck trying to get in and open that gate is hanging out on the road. So I know there's at least some distance for fire trucks that have to be there for a gate.
Okay.
But again, we weren't looking this as for emergency access, but more for the gate
I mean,
trucks,
here,
yeah.
I'm looking at it as, you know, if it's something that we're going to approve, we're essentially approving access in the future. So
Yes.
I'm not looking at it just emergency. I'm looking at it as I'm long-term, thinking long-term here.
Yes. That's why we included some language in that condition of approval, that even though this is here now and fits, we feel it still needs to line up a little bit more with Landfair intersection, because it is a little offset from that, and that's where we had required from the construction drawings that this design may be tweaked in the construction drawings, that we would get that full access design to meet FDOT and our codes.
I may seem like I'm jumping around, but I'm getting to, I guess, the point a roundabout way. What does the code that you are citing that requires 2 access points, does it require that those access points be on different roads?
No, and it's not, this is a comprehensive plan policy, which we've incorporated into Article 19. I have quoted it in your staff report. The city shall require that future subdivisions with 25 units or more at a minimum have at least 2 points of access open to motor vehicle traffic.
Okay. Does it, from what you're reading, I don't also, I don't hear a requirement for distance between access points?
Then that would get in, then that goes into the Land Development Code, Article 10, that has our design standards
And that
for
is?
distances between accesses and from intersections and things like that.
Just so we're on the same page, that distance is?
I don't have it offhand, and I don't have the code book with me. That's what I was looking for earlier today, so I'd have that. I don't have that.
Okay.
If they were on the same street, I know it's at least a couple hundred feet.
Was it ever considered to make the existing emergency access a full access? A secondary access, full access?
If that was a thought, my safety thought goes in, though, is that now you again have both of your entrances on one road. It's a pretty loopy road, so that if there was any type of flooding or loss of access to Powerline Road, you have no exit from the subdivision.
And I hear you on that, but it sounds like the public, neither the residents of the community want it, nor the residents adjacent want it. So I'm just wondering if we're doing this because it's a code requirement, if it meets code to make the existing emergency access a full access, is that an option?
I don't know if there's enough land there to make that other emergency a full access. I'm not sure it's again, is it meeting the code for traffic distribution? It's all going on that same road then? It has not been considered, is what I can tell you with that, if that's an option.
Okay.
I guess I'm not seeing the value of having both of those entrances on the same road. Whether they're 1,000 feet apart, the addition, those residents still have to do then that same loop around to get to those 1,000 feet apart. This is another option to get additional traffic. Powerline Road, I do not know what the FDOT plan for when they widen 510, if there's going to be an intersection, a light there, what their design is. Again, we're putting more traffic onto Powerline Road, which is already at certain times very hard to get off of to get onto 510.
Yeah, I guess my thought process here on this is that if we are okay with the emergency access being to Shakespeare, theoretically, that means all proposed traffic would be on Powerline anyways. And it seems to me that this requirement is more of a code requirement. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. Is there been any precedent for variance from this requirement?
So the code is funny. In some sections, it's called a waiver when we bring overlay district stuff before you. In some sections, it's a variance. In the Article 19 for subdivision, it's called an adjustment. So an adjustment was already given to the parent parcel of having those two entrances. The parent parcel already got that adjustment, which says if you can't do the two entrances, you can have the emergency. So that was given for the parent parcel in 2004. In consideration that at the time, Shakespeare wasn't
being that this is a separate plat, would they be able to also file for an adjustment?
That can be looked into. It wasn't requested. Okay. The adjustment is from requirements in Article 19. To not have the two entrances, I don't know how you get an adjustment or a variance from a comprehensive plan requirement. Okay. The adjustments are for any of the articles or the requirements in Article 19. The regulations or requirements, that's what you get an adjustment for from something from the Land Development Code. This is required by the comp plan. I don't know if you can get a variance or a waiver from that, an adjustment.
I guess my last question would be to the applicant. So you guys had mentioned that this was requested by the city staff, this secondary access. Do you feel like it is an option to provide another access where the emergency access is? Is that even viable?
I'm not sure. It wasn't even brought up in all the time getting the project to this point, I don't believe.
So this was required at the 2020 preliminary plat that came before. And that plat had an access onto Shakespeare. As an emergency access, Because in 2020, there was not the feasibility of extending Shakespeare. What's ensued in the last 3 years is we've had an application for River Oaks Preserve, and we've had an annexation where we've required the additional 25 feet to widen Shakespeare Street south of Landfair, not north of Landfair, but south of Landfair. So within the last 3 years, that has opened up the plans and the feasibility of extending Shakespeare.
I guess my question is very specific to, is the room there, is it feasible to basically upgrade the existing emergency access where it is and make it a full, yes, on power line. There's a current full access and there's an emergency access.
You know, I have no idea. I can tell you from, like Dory said, from traffic engineering, which I am not a traffic engineer, that's a very bad design. You don't want both of your accesses or entrance egresses at the same place. You know, they're separated, of course. Like Dory said, this is a big subdivision. Coming from the far west to the far east just makes no sense. As far as looking into it, if staff directs it, sure, I guess we could look into it.
The consideration only come up tonight, so
Yeah,
I've not pulled the track, we've
Yeah.
not pulled that, so we don't have any information for you on that one, on that consideration.
Sure. I'm just thinking if it's something that, you know, you guys didn't want, you'd look at other options potentially. So I just bring it up to see if it was something that was discussed. I would say just all in all, I think it was, I wrote her name down. I think it was Donna. And I don't know if she's still here, but she had mentioned just making sure it's the right thing for the community. And I, as many of you know, I mean, I'm very much an advocate for development. But I don't think this access makes sense. Just because it's, you know, both sides don't want it. And I don't, and I think we were going back to, you know, how many people would actually use it and, but if it's something that code requires, that's why I'm going back to, can we find an alternative that would also meet code? So that's kind of where I'm trying to get to. Anyhow, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I just have a few little comments. I would like to address the idea that I didn't raise my hand when I said we've been down Shakespeare. I have been down Shakespeare. I don't make it a practice to go down Shakespeare because I know you all don't want me to. So, but there were 13 speakers here tonight who spoke about Shakespeare. Every single one of you said that Shakespeare is a dangerous street. Right now, it's dangerous. Right now.
I didn't say dangerous.
Please. You all said that it's problematic, that people go the wrong way, that children are playing in the street, your dogs are walking in the street, it's not wide enough. The garbage trucks, it's a problem right now. We get it. We know that. And I will tell you that I've been involved with city and neighborhood planning for probably more than 50 years. And I will tell you that no streets get built without engineering. And the engineers are much smarter than I am. They figure out how the water gets moved from place to place. I don't know if you've ever been to Houston. They've built some hellacious roads in Houston and they never flood. They're 16 stories high and the ones up there do not flood, and I'll tell you what, I don't want any of those here. But I will tell you that the narrower the street, the less safe it is. And if you want a safer street, it needs to be wider. And yes, it does. Otherwise, you have what you have. And I'm not here to make an argument. This is just an observation, and it's my observation, and I listen to yours, so now you need to listen to mine.
Where's my officer? Supposedly here.
Public
No,
input
he's
is
supposed to
over.
be here.
This is my turn. With regard to the emergency exit, most of the gated subdivisions, if not all, in our city have emergency exits that most of you would not be able to recognize if you saw them. And I don't believe that one has ever been used. Never. We provide for that unknown emergency. It's kind of like you carry an umbrella in your car because it might rain. You don't go to get your umbrella after it started raining because then you're all wet already. So that's what an emergency exit is all about.
But it's not simply an emergency, it's
Please, please, please. I think you can leave now. Okay? If you can't be quiet, you can leave. I know that this is not perfect. We don't live in a perfect world. It isn't perfect for everybody. I don't see how it doesn't fit with our comprehensive plan. This is the preliminary plat. There will be many modifications along the way, for sure. And I'm sorry to say it, but trying to stop your neighbor from using his land is like trying to stop the sun from rising. Not going to happen, one way or another. That's all I have to say. If there is no more deliberation, then the chair will entertain a motion. No more deliberation?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to City Council for the approval of the proposed preliminary plat for the Cross Creek Lakes Addition subdivision with the following 6 conditions as stated in the staff report.
Second. 1 through 6? Okay. We have a motion and a second, and I'd like to have a call vote, please.
Yes. Ms. Kinchin?
Yes.
Ms. Battles?
No.
Ms. Cottenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Mr. Haddix?
No.
Ms. LaRusso?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
There are 4 ayes and 3 nays. So the motion passes.
Motion is carried. And I will tell you that you get another swing at it at the council meeting. This will be before council. Thank you.
We're still having a public meeting. Please exit quietly.
We have no unfinished business and no new business. So we are adjourned. Thank you.